Hi there. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to talk about a topic that is interesting in the field of antibody modifications and how technology actually is evolving. And there's several areas where antibody modifications and antibody optimization is quite relevant. And I want to talk about a few of those areas and give you just a few highlights, given that this is a rapidly expanding and extensive field overall. Obviously, the antibodies should bind to their target, and we want to modify them in a way that they bind to their target with high affinity, that they are able to bind potentially different targets at the same time, but also that they're able to recognize different variants of a, for example, given pathogen, so breadth. The second point is that we want the antibodies to be as efficacious as possible and mediate their function in a streamlined way. And so therefore, modifications, in particular of the FC effector region, are being developed. A third area where modifications and antibody engineering is relevant is to reduce immunogenicity. So a protein like an antibody given to a host can induce antibody responses and therefore reduce the half-life of this therapeutic antibody. It also can trigger unwanted side effects. So reducing the immunogenicity of an antibody by engineering is another goal of these modifications. Another area is pharmaceutical properties of the antibodies. Antibodies can be engineered and optimized for better large-scale manufacturability, for solubility, for stability, factors like that. And last but not least, pharmacokinetics and biodistribution. We want antibodies to be in their circulation for a longer time than they might be in their wild-type version. We want antibodies to potentially go to specific compartments in the body, penetrate into tumors, maybe cross the blood-brain barrier. And for that, modifications are necessary and are being developed. So today I'm going to speak about affinity and breadth, effector functions, and pharmacokinetics, given that these are all large areas, and I just want to give you some highlights. So in terms of breadth, target binding, and affinity, you can see here the normal IgG with the Fab and the FC area. And there are many different modifications that have been developed. These are just a few examples. For example, just using the single chain variable fragments here fused to the FC region, just two Fabs or single Fab, diabodies, but also like nanobodies, for example. And recently there was a nanobody actually approved for the treatment of TTP. In addition to that, there's other areas where we want to actually modify antibodies to target and bind to different antigens. And so therefore, the idea of bispecific or maybe even trispecific antibodies or multispecific antibodies has been developed. And the goal here is really to be able to have a single molecule that attaches to different targets at the same time. That can be achieved by just adding Fab areas or these single chain variable fragments for one specificity to the antibody that is specific to a different antigen. Or you just fuse these single chain variable fragments to the FC part as it's seen here or here. Two representatives of this are the so-called BiTEs and DARTs. BiTE stands for bispecific T-cell engager. Again, you have the single chain variable fragments here attached with a linker sequence. And therefore they're smaller than a full normal molecule, IgG molecule. But also the form DART is dual affinity targeting, where you can see that both of these single chain variable fragments are attached like in a diabody, but also stabilized with a disulfide bridge. There's many other variants. I cannot go into all of those, but there's a lot going on. In the end, the modifications, as I said, are not only to bind to different specificity, but also to make the molecule smaller, because that has often pharmaceutical benefits. So bispecific antibodies, as I just mentioned, why do we want that? Why is that beneficial? And so there's many ideas behind and many concepts. I'm just going to list a few of them. Bridging cells is one of them, where you want to bind with the antibody to your target cell, being an infected cell, be it a tumor cell, And with the other arm of the antibody, you bind to your effector cell. Could be a T cell, could be an NK cell. And you want to bring those together with the idea that the effector cell will kill off your target cell. One of those examples that is FDA approved is blinatumomab, which is a BiTE, which is directed against CD3 on T cells and against CD19 on B cells for the treatment of B-cell leukemia. Tatumaxumab is another antibody that was on the market and taken off the market that was also directed against CD3 on T cells and against epithelial adhesion molecules. Another idea is to bind to receptors on a tumor cell, and by binding to two receptors, down-modulating the oncogenic signaling. And an example is amivantamab for lung cancer treatment. A third idea is that an antibody, bispecific antibody, binds to different receptors and activate with that binding. And for example, in hemophilia A, where the factor 8 for the coagulation is missing, imizizumab is an antibody that binds to factor 9A and 10, and therefore replaces the factor 8. Piggybacking is an interesting concept where the bispecific antibodies actually use receptors, for example, on the blood-brain barrier, to be transported into the CNS. And I'm going to go back to that in a bit. And finally, antigen breadth. As I said, if we have very diverse pathogens, as we find for HIV or for SARS-CoV-2, for example, we would like the antibodies to be able to bind different variants of those pathogens at the same time. Overall, there's over 100 bispecific antibodies that are currently in development. So going back to the breadth, and just an example for HIV, given that it's really virally diverse globally, and that's one of the obstacles of treating that infection. And two examples, this is a bispecific antibody here that is binding against 10E8. That's the antibody which binds an area of the envelope trimer of HIV. So binds the virus. And on the other side is an antibody, ibalizumab, which actually binds the CD4 receptor on cells. And so therefore, this combination is extremely powerful in neutralizing different viral variants for HIV. If you see this breadth and potency curve here, breadth, the more different variants of the virus you can neutralize, and potency, the less of the antibody you need to achieve that goal. These are sitting really up in the right upper corner where you want them, where they're extremely potent and extremely broad. Another goal is obviously to achieve that, or another way to achieve that is to use different specificities in this trispecific antibody that's currently being tested also in clinical studies, which has 3 different specificities for the HIV envelope trimer. And so this trimeric or trispecific antibody actually was able to protect rhesus macaques against a challenge with different simian human immunodeficiency viruses, as you can see here, while the animals, when they were treated with a single antibody alone, were not protected. So again, showing that this like trispecificity or even bispecificity just enhances the breadth over all of these molecules. So let's get to pharmacokinetics on biodistribution. If we inject IgG, then the half-life is 2 to 3 weeks. If we want to enhance half-life for these antibodies, then we have to modify that. One mechanism how antibodies are cleared is via the neonatal Fc receptor. Antibodies getting ingested by pinocytosis. In the endosome, they have the ability to bind to these Fc receptors. If they don't bind, they're going to be degraded in the lysosome, and the bound ones are being recycled and excreted by exocytosis, and therefore come back to the circulation. And using this mechanism that is highly pH dependent and dependent on the tissues as well, multiple Fc variants have been developed so far. I'm just giving 2 examples, but there's a whole list of different variants with different characteristics. One is the M428L and N434S mutations called LS that increases the binding by 11-fold. Another one that is the YTE has a similar efficacy. They increase half-life by 3 to 4-fold. An example is an anti-HIV antibody, N6 here, without the modification. The LS modification has a half-life in rhesus macaques of 3 days. With the modification, it increases it to 8 days. The same for an HIV antibody in humans at different doses here. This is measured 4 weeks after the dose was given. Without the LS, you get a certain level, and with the LS mutation, the level is significantly higher, showing that the half-life is increased. There's one antibody against C5 currently that is FDA approved and that has half-life extending FC modifications. Another mechanism or modification that are being developed right now is to cross the blood-brain barrier. As we know, IgG delivered IV in the blood does not cross into the CNS, CSF for some targets that should be reached with antibodies. It's difficult to get there. And so the idea is that the blood-brain barrier has several receptors to transfer their respective ligands, like the insulin receptor or the transferrin receptor. And the concept is to use a monoclonal antibody that binds to these receptors and then fuse that antibody with our therapeutic antibody. That means that the antibody against the receptor acts as a Trojan horse and piggybacks pretty much the therapeutic antibody and brings it into the CSF or CNS and to bind to their target there. This is still a concept in development. There's, to my knowledge, currently no approved antibodies using this concept yet. So coming to FC effector functions. This is a very large area, and as we know, FC mediated functions are diverse. As you can see here, antibody bind to their target, and with their FC area and via FC receptor binding that is expressed on different innate effector cells that can mediate phagocytosis here, ADCC, so cellular cytotoxicity via NK cell activity, neutrophil phagocytosis, but also can present immunocomplexes through dendritic cells to T cells and boost T cell immunity. Why are FC so important for antibody function? Here measured ADCC and ADCP, so cellular phagocytosis and cellular cytotoxicity. If we add antibodies against HIV to quiescent HIV-infected cells, then we don't see any activity. If we stimulate those cells and these start making virus, and we add the antibody, then we see like significant activity of ADCC and ADCP. If we cleave off the FC region and we don't have that anymore there, then we see that the efficacy completely drops, as you can see here. Another example is if we take an HIV-infected cell here in green and we co-incubate that with an anti-HIV antibody like 2G12 in yellow, and then we add NK cells to the culture, then we can see that actually the antibody binds to the cell surface, but also attracts the NK cells. The NK cells now really start hitting hard on the target cell, and as you can see here, lead to complete destruction of the target cell. So there's different ways how we can engineer FC regions. We can use different subclass or isotypes. For example, IgG3 has a much better ability to activate NK cells. IgG1 and IgG3 perform better in phagocytosis, for example. There's different FC variants. We can point mutate the FC area, and with these different modifications, as you can see here, increase NK cell activation, increase phagocytosis. But the FC domain also carry a glycan at position 297. And this glycan actually, and the different compositions of this glycan affects how well FC functions are being mediated. For example, this core fucose here, if it's present, then it downregulates the ability to mediate cytotoxicity, so ADCC. Bisecting GlcMAX, for example, increase that ability. So one way to modify that, engineer that more systematically is a platform that is called Reform, rationally engineered and functionally optimized recombinant monoclonals. So you use your starting monoclonal, and then you modify the FC either by generating this monoclonal in different isotypes or subclasses, or by really modifying the FC by point mutations. And you can get a whole battery of different variants here and create that library, and that library of antibodies with all the same specificity, but different functions can then be tested and down selected in functional assays using innate effector cells. And at the end, you choose the one that you think is the best for your purpose. And an example was shown here by Bonnie Gunn and published in Immunity. That was an anti-Ebola glycoprotein antibody that was strongly neutralizing. And the question was, can that be modified to induce other Fc functions as well? So these are flower plots. These are the different functions here: neutrophilic phagocytosis, complement cellular phagocytosis, complement deposition, and K cell activation and just neutralization here. The bigger the petal of this flower, the more activity was there. You can see here the wild type kind of is heavily neutralizing, but it doesn't do anything else in terms of function. But with the modifications, you can see that the flowers get bigger, and you can enhance that antibody by those Fc modifications to mediate additional functions outside of neutralization. Glycoengineering is the last point that also helps to modify the Fc function. As I mentioned, the different compositions have large effects. There's 36 different possible structures of that. If you use an antibody made in CHO cells, then you have a certain activity, as you can see down here. If you make it in a glycoengineered plants, for example, that's an HIV antibody, then you can fucosylated, agalactosylated, or hypergalactosylated. Over all these modifications, increase function compared to the wild type in the CHO cells. There's 4 different antibodies currently produced in CHO and mammalian cells that are on the market, where actually the fucose is knocked out or reduced to increase ADCC, as I showed in the beginning. So this is being used already in product development. Plant-based in tobacco plants that are glycoengineered was the ZMAP cocktail, an anti-Ebola antibody that was agalactosylated and fucosylated to induce ADCC activity of that antibody. So last but not least, antibody drug conjugates exist, where the antibody is attached to whatever payload one wants to deliver: toxophores, transcription factors, nucleotides. It has the benefit that the antibody brings the payload directly to the target. So overall, it's dose sparing, and it's not as toxic systemically as if you would give your payload directly. The linkers can come as cleavable versions or non-cleavable versions. And overall, there's 11 FDA-approved APCs currently as of September 2021, primarily for the treatment of malignancies. So in summary, the FDA just recently actually approved the 100th monoclonal antibody product. This is a really rapidly developing field, in particular in the engineering part as well. Most monoclonal antibodies currently are being developed and engineered to some degree, either be it like bi or trispecific or fragment of antibodies, or in the production, as I showed, to reduce fucose or modify the glycans, or Fc modify them to increase half-life. There's seemingly unlimited possibilities to modify Fc-mediated functions, as I've shown. The question is, which ones are relevant for the purpose of the antibody, for that specific therapy that the antibody is developed for? And therefore, it's really important for us to gain a better understanding of the Fc functiome. I just made up that word, but what function for what target in what tissue do we want to achieve our therapeutic goal? And so I think more research is necessary to better understand that, to optimize antibodies for preventing or treating disease. Thank you very much.